Tonight. This is welcome to our first Zoom presentation for the 2024 gardening season. And we'd like to let you know that also that this meeting is set up where the videos are turned off. But if you would like to turn them on, that is fine. We would ask that you do mute yourself during the presentation so that we can hear everyone as they speak to us. This is a seed ordering and seed starting, the ins and outs presentation. And many of us, especially master gardeners and those of us who love to garden, are already beginning to plan our gardens for this next season. We're thinking about, what do we want to plant and maybe different varieties that we might want to grow this year. So we want to start out tonight with some tips for ordering your own seeds so that you can grow exactly what you want to grow this year. And that will be a shorter presentation. We'll have that presentation first, and then we'll take a few minutes for questions after that. And then take maybe a 1-minute break just to let our second presenter get set up for their presentation on seed starting and some best practices for seed starting at home. So if you do have questions as we're going along, please feel free to either put them into the chat or save them for the end of the presentation, and then you can ask your questions then. We'll have that little time after the first presentation. So I'd like to start us out and introduce you to Susan Swing, who is one of the master gardeners for Kane County and also works out at Sherman Natural Prairie and Community Garden and is part of the garden team. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about seed purchasing. So I will turn it over to you, Susan.
Okay, thank you, Colleen, and welcome to everyone. It's about 0 degrees outside and wind chill 20, and a perfect time to be talking about seeds. Okay, it's not advancing. Okay, let's try this. Here we go. In case you're not convinced you want to be planting your garden using seeds, here are some reasons why you might consider doing that. The first one is the big one for me and many of us master gardeners, and it's really variety, variety, variety. You can grow so many more varieties of vegetables from seeds than you can from plants that you would purchase at a nursery or a big box store. And similar to that, there are some plants you can't even grow unless you grow them from seeds, such as I think beans and carrots, for instance. You just can't buy the plants. So another reason for seeds. Also, there's a much better selection of organic hybrids, heirloom, and open pollinated seeds than there are plants in the nurseries. And I'm going to be going over those terms momentarily. It may be more economical to plant from seeds, but I'm going to say that's a really big maybe. For some of us, I'm guessing we spend quite a bit on seeds, and they're only, it's going to be more economical under certain circumstances, such as if you use all your seeds, if you share your seeds, if you get your seeds from friends, and a few other things like that. One of the main driving forces for me for growing from seeds is that I just really love the challenge. Colleen suggested that I might want to share what I like to grow from seeds. Well, I like to grow everything from seeds. or at least try to grow everything from seeds. And here's just a small subset of the seeds that I planted in my gardens last year. And some of these are like things that I regularly plant sort of annually, and some of them are new. And so some very long-standing plantings from me are the lima beans, the Christmas lima beans. Can't buy them in a store. Moonlow tomatoes, as far as I know, can't buy them in a store. And various other things, same thing. About, I would say 2/3 of the seeds I plant are specialty seeds and varieties that you're not likely to be able to find in grocery stores or in the nurseries to grow from plants. Let's see. My approach is right now my garden beds are pretty much filled up with the varieties that I have already. And my approach is that maybe every year I'll try a new thing or two and rotate something else out. So many varieties and so little space. One interesting fact that I failed to mention earlier, talking about varieties that I want to share with you, is just that I looked at one seed catalog, and in this one seed catalog, there were 80 varieties of tomatoes, 51 varieties of bell and hot peppers, and 34 varieties of lettuce. Well, who needs 80 varieties of tomatoes? I don't know, maybe Patsy, but others of us probably don't. But nonetheless, just know the choice is there. Whether you're looking at a seed packet or in a seed catalog, you'll likely encounter the terms that you see there on the left, or at least some of them. And on the example seed packet, you can see that these carrots are heirlooms. And on the back of the seed packet, it says they are open pollinated and untreated and non-GMO. So I'm going to tell you, just comment briefly on the implications sort of these different terms for your seed selection. So if a seed is marked as organic, what that means is that it has been harvested from a plant that has been grown organically. So organic growing is organically approved soil and no use of synthetic fertilizers or pesticides. And if you purchase an organic packet of seeds, what you're doing is really supporting those organic growers. And you're also supporting healthy soil and a healthy environment, because conventional agriculture does use these synthetic products, which are not good for the soil or environment. Heirlooms are plants that have been grown generation after generation for 40 to 50 years or more. They are all open pollinated, which means that they are pollinated by insects or birds or the wind. And one implication is that you can save these seeds and grow your own plants, and you will get a plant and vegetable similar to what you got from the seed that you first planted. And the growing conditions have to be right for that to happen. And that's not something I want to go into, but just know that there is that possibility. And heirlooms are considered fairly valuable kinds of seeds since they're passed down from generation to generation. And for reasons such as the flavor of the vegetables, the maybe adaptability, couple other things, let's see here. Flavor, adaptability, productivity, and some of them are like adapted to certain regions, so something to pay attention to. Hybrids are plants or seeds that have been cross-pollinated, so you take two parent plants and you cross-pollinate them without the use of any special manual or laboratory type techniques. It's just a selective breeding process. And hybrids could give you a more productive plant, or they quite often they are created for disease resistance, and that's what makes for a more productive plant. These next two terms, non-genetically modified organism and untreated, kind of go together. This is sort of it's very interesting that a lot of these seed packets, or it's noted in all the seed catalogs, that the seeds are non-genetically modified. Well, it's really the case that there are no genetically modified seeds that are marketed to home gardeners. So you don't really need to be concerned about that, but you will see some seed packets say non-GMO on them, others don't. Just know that none of them are genetically modified seeds. And I mentioned this, genetic modification is a very controversial process, which I won't go into unless we have some questions about it. But so that's the reason that the seed companies are putting it on their seed packets, so people that are sort of in the know will know that their seeds are safe. Untreated seeds are also, they're infrequently marketed, or treated seeds are infrequently marketed to home gardeners. So for the most part, you can feel safe in knowing that the seeds that you are purchasing in your seed packets are untreated, even if they don't say that. And the seeds that are treated can be treated with fungicides and pesticides and other kinds of things like that, that organic gardeners really don't want on their seeds. And the last the last term there, pelleted. I don't see many pelleted seeds, but I have tried to plant some. And these are typically tiny seeds that have an organic clay coating on them. There are some benefits to those seeds, including that because they're coated, they are now larger and easier to plant. You can space them out appropriately. They don't wash away as easily. And so you're kind of saving, you're not wasting as many seeds and having to replant. Okay, that's at least in theory. The only disadvantage that I know of for pelleted seeds is that in the process of pelleting, the viability, the kind of the shelf life of the seed is decreased. And if you buy pelleted seeds, you have to kind of plant them the same year that you buy them. Otherwise, there's probably a good chance they're not going to germinate. And pelleted seeds are pretty good for kids since they're a little bit bigger. Okay, now maybe to the crux of the matter, ordering seeds. Well, there are really three ways to get at least three ways to get your seeds. I'm going to touch on ordering seeds, buying seeds locally, and then the seed swap possibility. So ordering seeds, there are really a very, very large number of companies from which you can order your seeds. And you could spend hours researching those online, or you can get some suggestions from presentations like this. And so the companies that I've listed on my slide here are those that I have ordered from, or otherwise have some knowledge of through presentations that I've been to, or they have been listed on more than one blog site, website to say, these are good companies. All of these companies are, I can't say, yeah, I think all of them sell heirloom, organic, and organic seeds, a mixture of these kinds of seeds. And all of them, as I mentioned before, sell non-GMO seeds. So my approach to ordering seeds is like, well, first of all, let me say I have ordered mostly from one company, and that is Seed Savers Exchange. It's in Decorah, Iowa. So it's kind of a local company, although the seeds come from all over. I've been pretty satisfied with the seeds that I've gotten there. They have so many varieties. I feel like I really don't need to go anywhere else. I do order a few seeds from Johnny's. They develop hybrids, and I like hybrids for plants that get powdery mildew. Doesn't keep them from getting powdery mildew, but at least in theory, they're supposed to be able to last longer, produce more fruit if they have that disease resistance that has come from being hybrid bred. Anyway, so those are my two kind of go-tos, and I have ordered from some of these other companies. I would suggest, just sort of checking out a couple companies, reading about them, look at the seeds they offer, and then if you like what you see, order some. And I would suggest trying to stay with a company or two, because every company charges shipping cost, and that can actually sort of mount up. And as one example, last year I bought 2 packets of seeds from one of these companies on the list, and I ended up with a $20 seed fee when the taxes and shipping were added in. So again, it can get kind of expensive. So it's good to just focus maybe on 1 or 2 companies to order all your seeds. Next suggestion, and if you want to order your seeds, do it now. The seed companies have already sent out their catalogs, and if you want a catalog, you can still order one, but they do at times run out of seeds, certain kinds of seeds. I mean, there are plenty of seeds out there, but if you happen to want something specific, which I sometimes do, it can be gone, and I have to really look around and then order from some other company 1 packet of seeds for $6 shipping. Again, just a little irritant, but anyway, just that pointer. Let's see. Okay, here's just a couple of excerpts from Johnny's seed catalog, and I wanted to show this because there's a lot of information in seed catalogs that you don't get from just looking at seed packets. And furthermore, it's kind of easier to look at a page in a seed catalog and compare varieties than it is to pull all those little packets off the shelf or out of the little bins and read about them. But starting on the left-hand side with the Catherine zucchini, just note that the F1 in that line means that vegetable is a hybrid. And the abbreviations below that F1 are the diseases that have that the hybrid has been bred to, I'll call it, resist. And again, it doesn't mean it won't get those diseases, but they will produce longer if they do. On the right-hand side, just note that there's they identify which of the greens there are organic, and then there's a little chart that shows which ones are very fast growing, slow growing. And again, these seed catalogs are just filled with very interesting growing information, interesting and helpful. And I basically just love seed catalogs. And some of them are like works of art. They have all these beautiful pictures of vegetables. So I encourage you, if you don't have seed catalogs, go online, try to take a look at some or order them if they're available. Okay, you can purchase some good seeds locally. And the brands of seeds listed on this slide are considered quality brands. And I'm going to tell you where they are available. So Seeds of Change, Menards has a small selection of those seeds. And Burpee, you're probably familiar with, it's available everywhere. Botanical Interest, it's one of my go-to brands for purchasing locally. And they are available at Platte Hill Nursery. And there are a couple locations of Platte Hill. And Platte Hill also has Livingston and Lake Valley seeds. But Livingston seeds are available at Blaine's Farm and Fleet, and Lake Valley seeds are available at, as I said, at Platte Hill, and also Gobert's Nursery in Hoffman Estates. And I think they have a fairly small selection, but a very nice selection at Gobert's. And all of these seeds are also available through mail order. And just as kind of another pointer, Platte Hill already has their seeds out on display. And I usually go there in April, and they look very picked over by that time. So order early, purchase early to get the best selection. And last thing, you can also get some seeds, mostly heirloom seeds, available through seed swaps, and there are a couple of those coming up. Kind of the caveat for a seed swap is that you need to have some seeds to swap. So if you don't have any, that's not the place for you, but it's something you might keep in mind for the future. Or you might want to go out and buy some and divide your seeds up and take them to the seed swap and get some others. So you see two of them there, one coming up in Elgin at the Rackal branch this Saturday, and there's another one coming up at the St. Charles Public Library. And this information is on the websites of these two different libraries. So that's all I've got. And I will end with a warning that seed purchasing can be addictive. So be careful out there. Colleen, you're muted.
Thank you for reminding me that I was muted. Jeez. Thank you, Susan. Wonderful. That was wonderful. Thank you for those great help tips. And if anyone has any questions they would like to propose to Susan at this point, now would be a good time. I don't see any in the chat at this moment. So speak up if you have a question you would like to ask.
Susan, can you give us an idea about how long a package of seeds can, how old they can be before you can plant them?
That's a good question and a difficult one because different seeds have different lifespans. And the best way to find that out is to actually Google it, sort of seed life, something like that. And you can see the seeds last anywhere from 1 year for, I think, parsnips up to 5 or 6 for lettuces. And I think Patsy planted some tomato seeds that were, what, 30 years old, 50 years old. So it's really kind of depends on the storage conditions of those seeds as well. If you leave your seeds in a hot area, you might kill them. Hot and wet. So you have to store them appropriately, and different seeds have different lifespans.
Thanks for that question. I had a question too. Anybody else? Have you had any experience with gurneys seeds and purchasing through them? I received their emails regarding their catalog and stuff, and I'm just really intrigued. I've never ordered from them before.
You know, I haven't ordered from them. I do think that Kim ordered strawberry plants from them last year.
Okay.
And it's just that I would order from them. I know they're fairly local too in Indiana, I believe.
Right.
So, yeah, I just have never had occasion to give them a try, but
Okay.
I have gotten catalogs from them.
Okay, I see a response here. Germination percentage decreases each year. You can plant years after the date. So I think you can find that out exactly too as you go along. Well, then thank you again, Susan. Wonderful. Do we have any other questions or, give us a minute and we'll let Jim get his, information pulled up and we'll go on to the next part. So, get yourself a drink of water or something, and we will move on in just a moment. Jim, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, I'm ready if everybody else is. I can dive right in.
Okay.
So with this presentation, this topic in general easily fills an hour, which we don't have. So I'm going to treat this presentation as a cursory overview of seed starting to give people a taste of what's involved. I think it's a more in-depth topic than just one presentation and off you're ready to go. There's tons of resources we can share on seed starting. But I think a lot of people that haven't done it before have the initial question of, oh, I'm thinking about doing this, or I tried something once and it didn't work. And at least now to get a sense of what's really involved, because I think part of the challenge that prevents people is there is a little bit more of a commitment in terms of getting some of the supplies you need to get started on seed starting. And we'll talk about what those supplies are, but wanted to at least preface it with that, as well as this isn't just the end all be all, but to give people exposure and something to think about. So kind of go along at a good clip here for a complex topic, but if anybody has more interest, we're more than happy to drill down deeper. So getting started here, let me get right. So as Susan mentioned, the flow of the presentation, we're going to talk briefly about seeds, but not much time, and then talk more about materials and techniques. This is where Susan mentioned a lot about the seeds themselves. Generally, people usually decide to start seeds because of their desire to have specific varieties or unique plants. Over time, it can save money. I find myself saving a lot of money on flowers and other things, but I'm very much deep into it and have all the supplies, so I keep using them over and over again, and that's where the savings come in. But for plots such as the size of Sherman, it's a little less practical. You're not planting huge gardens full of flowers, but this is more about the enjoyment you get from the gardening in the off season, as well as the ability to get those unique varieties that are hard to find. Seed packets tell you exactly when to plant. Usually these are now you're doing the opposite of what we normally tell you, which is you're looking for those plants that say sow indoors. Start seeds 3 to 4 weeks prior to your last frost date. So those are the ones we are used to buying at you know, the big box stores and the nurseries and things that are ready to go for us to put in the ground in May. So look for those at this time. They are out, and again, as we mentioned, there are a bunch of different sources for seeds. Here is a reminder of what our frost-free date is. So usually what you do is you work backwards from there. In the case, for our purposes, most of the time, given that you're doing vegetables, most of them you start 4 to 6, maybe 6 to 8, depending on if it's a real stubborn one, prior to our last frost date. So you can see, now the challenge is our last frost date is April 16th, but really a lot of these are heat-loving plants. So I usually push more into May for a plant date because one, this is our average last frost date, so there's still a 50% chance of frost at this point. And two, tomatoes aren't going to do a darn thing if it's cool in April. They might not die, but they really aren't going to grow. So I err on the side of more well into May when we're really in our safe planting date. To figure out when I'm going to start those seeds. So I back off from, I usually use May 15th, you can use May 10th, but somewhere in that range. And so you've got a wide range of time, and then it takes space. You have to have a dedicated space, either somewhere in your house or basement. It does have to maintain a heat of, I'd say, at least about 60-some degrees. Low 60s is fine. But you do have to have space to handle all these plants that you're growing in awkward containers, and as well as for all of your supplies. So do need to plan on that, and that it's going to be there for 2 months. So you can't just, you have to give some room. So some of the supplies we talk about, labels and markers and those type of things you have around, but a light source with a timer optional. I find a timer practically mandatory because there's so much, it's so easy to forget to turn them on or off. A simple lamp timer does that for you. Sterile containers with drainage, a seed starting mix, and then a fan or some type of air movement. Plants respond to a different spectrum, a full spectrum of light. So we have to take that into account when we're growing plants indoors. And that's why there's more specific light requirements for growing plants indoors. Now, one of the common ways of doing it, and it's old-fashioned, but I find it works well, is using fluorescent bulbs, which you see here in this picture, and we'll talk about that. But then more common now to find in little handy kits and stuff are the LEDs, and that's a new technology for gardeners. We're still learning a lot about how to grow plants under LED lights. I'm still finding, as the research is coming out, because it's been for decades, it was all about growing under fluorescent lights, and a lot of the resources only refer to those. So do be sure to find materials that are specific for the types of lights you've purchased. So the fluorescent tubes, there's a range of colors. Usually how I do it is I have one tube of, I use fluorescent light fixtures, and I have one tube that is the white standard that you would use in a shop light fixture or classroom fixture, just that white bulb that you're used to finding. And then also a grow light type bulb or aquarium is also a similar use, and it's got a purple kind of color to it. And what that does is it gives you the high spectrum and the lower spectrum, and covers the full range for the plants that way with 2 different types of tubes. We also have it then with LEDs have the same thing. I think we're getting used to now the K warmth ratings on the bulbs. So that's, and again, I'm not as versed on the LED, but people are learning their way through it. With fluorescents, you want them really close to the lights. You want them 3 inches above the lights. They need every last photon of light that you can get. LEDs being so much more powerful, we're talking 8 to 18 inches above. So very much different. And part of the reason that I keep with my fluorescents is I have a nice stand setup that only allows me maybe 6 inches of clearance or so over the light. So I don't want to get the intensity that an LED might provide. With the fluorescence, I do about 14 to 16 hours a day. Sometimes you rotate the plants a little bit just to make sure they're not in a dark spot. Again, that's where the timer comes in great. And LEDs, we say less time, it might not need to rotate. Again, I think it's still kind of a new thing, but the information is catching up to LED lights finally. A lot of different setups here. The classic is a bench with adjustable lights, which is a key in any case, because you start off with the plants quite small, and then as they grow, you need to adjust the light to adapt to their environment. So that's kind of the normal setup, that when you're accounting for it, some way adjusting the light. You can't just keep it in the same spot. Otherwise, if the big plants get too close to a light, especially the LEDs, they will actually burn, not from the heat, but from the light exposure. So you need to be careful with that. But a lot of times there's nice carts. I've got a nice cart set up as well, but you don't need all of that. You just need a way to have the light be adjustable and a spot that you can contain the containers in. So many people are hopeful that they can just use sunlight, but the reality is, other than finally now this cold snap, it's been so darn gloomy. You can't rely on that, as well as just the weakness of the sun and how little comes in any given window in your home. That's a little tricky. So we need this reliable light to really get good performance and sturdy plants out of seedlings. So we have to rely on this. And then eventually sun catches up, we can put plants outside, and then off we go. The other supplies you'll need, fan to just keep, in general, you want to keep the air moving in the environment, but you want to be careful not to dry things out. Timers, again, as I said, they're handy. Containers, they need to be sterile. If you want to reuse ones, you can just soak them in a bleach solution for 10 minutes, and that kills out of the pathogens and viruses that might be attached to them. But you want to make sure you do that. The idea why they need to be sterilized is the home environment is so much more nurturing to all these diseases because they don't have the harshness of outdoors. So you want to be careful, much like your houseplants are much more prone to get this little bug and that little bug and cause problems. Same is true with seedlings. They can get these delicate diseases that normally they can be tough outside. And on that same vein, we want to make sure we use a soilless mix, not a potting soil. You want one that says seed starting mix, and very often they'll say sterile mix. The point of this, again, is you don't want to have any medium that could introduce any type of pathogen into your seedlings. It doesn't take much to kill them in terms of diseases. And also you want to have containers that have drainage in them, because seeds that aren't allowed to drain will just rot away. And I'll keep going here. For your setup, you want to have a covered tray. A lot of the little seed starting kits you might see out there come with a nice little dome, and that's great for keeping the soil nice and evenly moist while the seeds are germinating. I think a lot of people make the mistake of leaving that on, and we'll talk about that. This is only during germination for that little plastic dome. Press them gently in the soil. Read the instructions carefully. Some of them might say needs light for germination. That means don't bury them. Just set them on the top. Again, this isn't outdoors, so you don't have issues with birds eating them or weather affecting them. You can just put them right on top of the soil, and you want to make sure they have contact with the soilless mix, but you don't need to necessarily be too concerned. As well as if you're doing a little more shallow planting and going to be transplanting, the seed depth isn't as critical when you're starting indoors. You do, if they say do cover it, maybe you don't need to go that full ½ inch. The seed will kind of make up for it because it's not as it's in a nurturing environment. So label with name and date planted. the date's optional, but boy, you need to label it somehow. I draw diagrams because everything that comes up is a little green seedling. Occasionally you can tell certain plants, but boy, all your tomato varieties, if you don't find a system to label them well, you won't have a clue until they produce fruit. So be sure to label everything in a way that you can keep it track of it, especially you'll be amazed how many seedlings look pretty similar. So that is an important step. You can do a germination temperature. You can use a mat, this is kind of the generic mat you can find everywhere, that helps get them the seeds nice and toasty warm, which does speed germination. Some people even say you can put it in a warm spot in your house. And for this purpose, it's not as sensitive that it's under the lights. It does need light. It can't be in a dark space, but if there's a nice warm spot in your house, you can get things going a little faster by getting the seeds germinating there. Then once they're going, then you move them under the lights necessarily. Or if you want it all ready to go, get a mat and have it ready to go. Check for germination frequently, daily is a good idea, just because it happens fast. Some varieties, something like broccoli, I can get it to germinate in 2 days with a dome and a heat mat. So it can happen quite quickly. So be on top of it, because once that happens, now you're in this very wet, damp environment that new plants don't like. So what you do is you wait till it's 80% sprouted. You'll start to see the little green specks get going. And if it's a bigger plant like a tomato, you'll see it come up like a normal seed. Be sure to get that cover off right away, because that's going to reduce the chance of getting a common disease called dampening off, and just promote the overall health of the plant. You need to get those leaves so they have some airflow around them. Otherwise, it's like a cesspool of viruses that can happen when you're dealing with a very moist, damp environment that's under that dome. And increase the light heights as necessary. Obviously, it started really low. Now they're going to start bending up towards the light, and you need to adjust, keep adjusting to make sure you hit the tops correctly. Sometimes it can be tricky if you've planted things in similar trays, that one's a little short guy, one's a tall guy, but you can kind of play games with it. And then as they grow, they're going to get their first set of true leaves, which we talked about with seeds. That's that more traditional looking leaf. And then you start with a weak fertilizer, half strength every other week, low numbers. There's not much to them. It's kind of like giving, you wouldn't give a big, protein bowl to an infant. They need very simple, minor, consistent feeding, consistent care, but not heavy nutrients right away, because they're still growing and adapting their systems to what their needs are. Thin by cutting, not by pulling. If you happen to need to thin, usually just clip them off. Otherwise, you can rip the roots out. Also, a common way is starting them in small little packets just to save space, and then transplant them into bigger pots to get going that way. Once you got them going and you're getting close to your plant date, you want to get them out. Now, even though you might look at the calendar and say, okay, it's time to get them out, as we know, you need to also be cognizant of the weather and not throw them outside when it's too harsh outside. If it's that 80-degree day, those random 80-degree days we seem to get in March, maybe don't put them outside in 80 degrees. Same thing with a nasty cold 40-degree day. But slowly, the idea here is to get them acclimated to the conditions that might be happening outside. But again, they've lived their life indoors under little glowing lights. They're not used to the harshness of the sun and the weather conditions and the wind and some of that other stuff. So you want to put them in a sheltered location, slowly add sunlight, and bring them inside at night, just to kind of give them the easiest transition possible. Then when you're finally ready, you see you've got a nice sturdy plant that can be outside all day, and it has acclimated. Then you want to give them a good water, try to put them in on a cloudy day, and give them some protection and plant like you always have. Any questions from this material? I know it's a lot, but it's a big topic, so I wanted to at least give people an idea what's involved. And hope we
Jim,
have
I had a
it.
question on your previous slide. You said to increase the sun by 3 hours a day. So if you start with 2 hours, then the second day, do you increase it to 5 hours? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, usually you want to slowly um build it up to what would be like full light. The other thing I would say is gauge the quality of the sun. You want to start off with kind of a weak sun, like a east facing sun, something that isn't so harsh. And then usually what I do is I start like I'll put them out on the east side of my house for a while, bring them back in, and then eventually they can spend all morning out on the east side, and then you can kind of start moving them around into the stronger and stronger sun. So, but yeah, gradual as possible, even starting out. Sometimes too, I'll start out in the shade as well. I guess I want to preface that as to you can have them outside, but very weak sun or into shade, and then get them used to the sun and it being in the day. So a lot of times
Okay.
I'll get them used to the shade for a while, so they get used to being outside, and it can be bright in the shade, as you know, for plants, and get them used to a good time out in the shade for a while, then kind of transition them into sunnier and sunnier locations.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, I'll ask a couple questions. Jim, what vegetables or seeds would you recommend that beginning sort of seed growers start with? Are there things that are easier than others to grow indoors?
Yes, I say the easiest ones, if somebody just wants to kind of get a taste of this, you can start things such as some squashes and pumpkins and those type of pumpkins. Obviously, not going to fit at Sherman, but um, squashes, zucchini, those type of things. You can start them a couple weeks indoors, like 2 or 3 weeks indoors in a sunny window. Very easy. Obviously, big seeds, they kind of pop up. The trick with them is they don't like to be handled, so you want to put them in like a peat pot or something that can go just right into the ground, and then kind of tear up the peat pot and then get them going. That's really easy if you don't want to commit to that, and want to get a head start with like a squash or something. On the more classic things, I would say tomatoes are one, obviously common. You find the seeds. They're pretty easy once you get going. I've rarely had problems with tomatoes. They they grow along nicely. They germinate nicely. Um, they progress nicely into the pots and outdoors. They don't have up and downs. So things like broccoli grows nice, but then it gets kind of floppy, and it can be a little tricky on some of the plants. Some of them are a pain to germinate as well. Like peppers can be fussy, and some of those. So yeah, I would say the best starting point would be tomatoes.
And another question, are there vegetables that you would recommend, like, don't bother to start this inside, just start it outside?
Yeah, I think actually it depends on the situation, because I would have said earlier, oh, just use seeds, but I'm finding myself with the variable springs we keep having to like pre-sprout seeds inside, like peas and beans and stuff, because I'm having problems just planting them directly in the soil. So I am having to do a little control the environment, because Mother Nature isn't as easy as it used to be. Um, so other than ones that specifically say like root crops, you just can't start indoors. But um, a lot of them I'm finding myself starting indoors a little more for better success.
Mm.
Hmm.
So by root crops, you're talking carrots and beets and
Yeah. Parsnips and yep.
yeah, parsnips and all those root crops, and which are easy enough to plant outside, right?
Right.
Um, can you talk a little bit more about what dampening off is and what it looks like and how you can know if that's what's going on?
Yeah, it's pretty easy when you have that germination happening in that covered dome. You'll see like this fuzzy puff ball that's actually the start of the I believe I think it's a fungus that is your indication that you need to act quickly. You need to that you're now at a risk for dampening off, that it is appeared on your plants. It isn't necessarily a death wish for the plants. What you need to do is get the cover off, get them dried out, reduce that moist environment that they're growing in, and that'll discourage it from taking root. And if you at all find that maybe some are getting affected, I would just take that as much of the affected ones and just remove them and discard them. It can spread quite significantly across your crops. So I think you need to be aggressive when you see it. It does happen occasionally. I've had it happen. And it's hard because you're starting to get things germinating and then it appears, but you still want to get that germination going. So yeah, it's a bit tricky.
Thank you. And it is going to happen right in the beginning with the germination.
Yeah, because that moist environment, once you take that cover off and everything, then the tops dry out a little more. It does happen to very small seedlings. Sometimes even the cover can be off, and you'll start to see seedlings just suddenly die, and that's your indication that something's wrong, and that's probably dampening off.
Okay. I see something here in the chat. But I don't see a question. Oh, well,
Dan-
Yep.
Danielle recommended radishes as one perhaps that would be easy to grow.
Yeah, those could be started. I've never started them indoors, but
neither have I. Hmm.
but yeah, you probably could if you really want to get a head start, get them germinating and a little bit ready to go. I have kind of transplanted them outside when I'm thinning, so they do transplant.
Very good.
I think that's-
Any other questions? We have 5 minutes left.
I've got to run, but thank you, everybody.
Okay. Anything else anybody would like to ask? Feel free. I'd like to remind you that we did record this presentation and we will make it available to our gardeners. As soon as we figure that all out, we will get to you and let you know that information, how you can watch or listen to the recording.